Well, one thing I'm going to point out is I think it was like a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned having gone to a practice and that Trey Galloway's shooting had looked good to you. And man, ever since you've said that, the games I watch, he's lighting it up. He is shooting so confidently, and not the only one, and I'm not just pointing him out, but it's since you mentioned that and seeing that in practice, man, every time I see him, I'm like, damn, Don was dead on, because he is shooting the ball so well in addition to doing other things that he does.
Well, you put the kiss of death on both me and Trey Galloway. You realize that. But you're right. He looks more confident this year, shooting the three. And to me, he looks confident with whatever he's doing on the court. He's a guy that I think is really got a tremendous basketball IQ. He works his tail off. He loves to play defense. He goes after everything. And I just think he's a huge, huge part of this basketball team, or will be as the season progresses. And we saw some of that in him last year, not the shooting part of it, but how hard he plays and the spark that he gives his team when he comes off the bench. And I'll tell you what, if you want to look at something that's impressive at this point, and granted the number of games played against who they played against doesn't indicate what you're going to see the rest of the year, but it gives you an insight into how strong this bench is. I mean, you've got guys coming off the bench 4 and 5 at a time, and they have sparked the offense, getting it going where Indiana's gone on these big runs to develop a big lead in the first half. And I'm really impressed with the depth that I see in this basketball team. It may be even deeper than we see at this point, because we're not getting a chance to see a couple of other guys down the bench like Logan Duncombe very much. But right now, you could say that Mike Woodson's got the 10 players he wants on his basketball team to be able to play on a consistent basis, because I think that's exactly what we've seen to this point.
And I know it can be hard, Don, to evaluate where a team stands through these first two games, given the level of competition. But the thing that stands out to me through the first two games was in the first game, in the opener, they play a smaller team. They go inside, only shoot 11 three-pointers and dominate. The next game against Bethune-Cookman, they play a team that has a little bit more size, and they're able, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it was 10 of 24 from behind the three-point line. Mm-hmm. I mean, this team already showing that it's going to be able to win basketball games in a variety of different ways, and that's compounded by the fact that they are so good on the defensive end right now.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, the defensive side of the basketball has improved, and we knew it took a big jump last year. And Mike emphasized that. The very first thing he talked to his team about was, we've got to get better defensively, and they got better last year as the year went on. This year, we're also seeing an improvement there again. And part of it is just due to the fact that the defense is no longer new to the veterans on this team, and the veterans are helping these young guys understand how important it is to play hard on that side of the ball and do the things that they're supposed to do, and help them understand what they're supposed to be or where they're supposed to be in certain situations. So you've got so many things going for you right now with a veteran group, and then you've got a young group that seems to be able to initiate what they need to do from what the veterans are telling them. And these guys seem to be all bought in. And of course, again, it's a very small sample size at this point, but it surely looks good up to this point. And it's going to get a test on Friday night, which we'll probably have a chance to see.
Yeah, because another thing is, generally when you look at a team and you'd say, oh, these are second unit guys, there would be kind of not stigma, but you'd feel like you weren't a big time contributor. That's not the case on this team. It is truly a second wave, is more appropriately to call it a second wave, because we used the word depth last year. Everyone said Indiana was really deep. They weren't. They had players, but they weren't deep. They're deep this year because the guys coming off the bench can freaking hurt you. Trey Galloway can hurt you. Malik Renaud can ruin you. He's like, I sent a tweet out a few weeks ago. It's like, okay, you're 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes into the game, and you need to give your big guy a rest. And Indiana does the same, because you see Indiana taking Trace Jackson Davis or Race Thompson out, so you send your guy in. But in comes Malik Renault. What the hell are you going to do with him? Because he's as good or better than what just came off of the floor. So Indiana is going to be a problem for every team in the Big Ten this year.
Well, look at the bench points of the first two games. 45 and 51. Now that's amazing. I mean, that to have that many points scored off the bench in any game. I don't care who you're playing. That's a dramatic number for any basketball team. And
51 in the last game.
Right. So you've got like I said before, you've got 10 guys that can play for sure. And the question, of course, as the season progresses is who gets hurt? Are there going to be injuries that play a key role here? Obviously, we hope that doesn't happen. But the fact of the matter is you've got as deep a team as Indiana's had probably since the beginning of the 2012-2013 season, when Cody Zeller, Victor Oladipo, and they had a really good bench that year. Unfortunately, it dwindled because Derek Elston got hurt. They had a couple of other injuries that season during the year that factored in, and they weren't nearly as deep as the season progressed. But honestly, right now, all you can say is this team is going to be fun to watch.
Don, one of the things that stood out to me last week, and a lot of the viewers last week, was in that second game against Bethune-Cookman, 35 made field goals, 27 assists. I mean, what are you seeing from a chemistry standpoint? Because it seems like right now the team is playing really in sync. There's a lot of cohesion and chemistry among those guys.
And that's kind of rare at the beginning of a season, because there are young guys that are mixed in there with the veterans. And usually that takes more time than what we've seen at this point. Now, maybe the competition has dictated that can be a lot easier at this juncture. We'll find out again more about that this week, because Xavier is going to be a test. But you're right. The chemistry with these kids looks really good. And it doesn't seem like anybody's really kind of worried about their playing time or the minutes that they're getting at this point. Again, that may play a role as we go forward, because let's face it, even though it's a team game and everybody says it's a team game, selfishness does creep its way into situations, especially when you got other people in your ear,
right,
as we all know these kids have. And, if everybody keeps their head on straight, it could be special.
Well, and to add to that point, I go back to Xavier Johnson and Jalen Hood-Schifino in that second game, combined 3 of 11 shooting, but they had 14 assists, 9 rebounds, and I think only 3 or 4 fouls in that game, finding ways to make an impact even when they're not scoring. I think that was a big question, particularly for Xavier Johnson coming into the season. These guys they're not selfish. If they're not forcing shots, if it's not their night, they're going to find another way to make an impact.
Well, and Xavier Johnson's a great example. In the first 2 exhibition games, what was Xavier Johnson doing? He was out there trying to force it. He was out there trying to make something happen, because that's what he thought his job was. But that's what he thought last year at the beginning of the season. Right. And it took almost a whole season for him to figure it out that he doesn't have to do the whole thing. He doesn't have to be the whole show out there. And in the 2 regular season games since those exhibition games this year, he has looked more like the player that we saw last year at the end of the year in those final 10 games. So I think that's a huge factor as well.
The only scary thing that I don't want to call it scary, because it's actually on the other side is a very, very positive. In the last game, you had 3 starters that combined to go 4 of 16 for 25%. Xavier, Jalen Hood-Schifino, and Race Thompson were 4 of 16 from the field, but the rest of the team was 31 of 44 for 70%. And I've seen that in both games. It's like the team, no matter who's shooting bad, the team is picking the other guy up. But I would like to see the shooting numbers of these starters increase a little bit. Not necessarily from 3, just field goal percentage, period. You definitely want to see the higher numbers from your starters.
Well, I think that'll happen. It takes time. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. Everybody is not going to play the same way, the same type. I mean, you can't expect everybody to have a good night all together each time that they play. That's what you hope will happen in the big ball games. Right now, you're kind of, again, you're feeling your way through this thing in the early going, even though they're playing pretty dramatically well from a lot of different people. They're getting a lot of great play from a lot of different folks out there. But other guys are going to, you're not going to shoot it great every time you walk out of the floor. And that's just part of it. And that's why
what this depth. Yes.
Exactly.
There you
That's
go.
why the depth of this basketball team is so important. And look, as we know, as the season progresses, the bench might get shorter, but it doesn't
Definitely.
look like it has to in this particular case. I mean, again, you've got guys that can step in there and it looks like can do the job. Again, when we start playing the consistent tough ball game after tough ball game, that kind of thing, we'll get a better feel for that. But this growing period that they've got going on right now at the early part of the season, that's what this is all about. And that's what you're trying to find out. You're going to find out about your basketball team as these tougher games start to appear.
Last thing I'll mention, how about that free throw shooting, Don? I mean, I've got to think back to Pat Graham, the days when you saw a free throw exhibition like that. 21 of 22. Had Jalen Hood-Schifino not missed that, I'll have to pull the book out. That might have set a record. I know Indiana went 18 of 18 once, but that may have been the best ever. And the reason I laugh is chuckles because the game before they couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat from the free throw line. So wow, what a turnaround. But I think it was Trey Galloway who said that they really started taking them seriously in practice. And I'm like, well, what the hell were you doing before? But it showed. It really showed. I mean, 21 to 22, that's focus. I don't care who the opponent is. That's irrelevant.
Well, you should have said that to Trey when he said it.
I wish I would have had the opportunity.
All I can tell you is I watch him, and when I watch practice, and I've seen 4 or 5 now, they work on free throw shooting all the time. And they did it last year too. And Archie Miller had them shooting free throws all the time. So,
well, it's not shooting. I think the key that he said was they took it more seriously, and I don't know what he meant by that.
Maybe concentration, focusing on the free throw shooting more, just other than taking a rest from the practice period. Who knows? I mean, these guys probably aren't really telling you everything that they think or know.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So I just look at it from the perspective that that was a great night of free throw shooting, and hopefully it carries over to the rest of the season.